Again, this is a very important story. Let's take a look. I posted about this on Twitter. I wrote that it's confirmed India has just bought oil from Russia at a discount and in rupees and rubles. And this is the real story that you won't hear on the news. Global realignment. And of course, you have a bunch of people who think they're very clever and say that's nothing special. India always buys oil from Russia. India has a special relationship with Russia. That's not the point. It's not the oil. The point is that they're buying it in rupees and rubles. Are you paying attention or not? So why is this significant? Again, India is the world's third largest importer of oil. India has a population of 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion. India is obviously a nuclear power, right? So is Pakistan next door. And, the quantity that India has bought from Russia, it's not a big quantity. It's about 3 million barrels. But it's the point that they're buying this. When are they buying this? They're buying this at a time when the entire world is trying to shun Russia and turn Russia into a pariah. And when we say the entire world, is that correct? No. The media wants you to think that the entire world is doing that, but India proves that that's not the truth. That's not what's happening. Here's the vote when the UN General Assembly tried condemning Russia. Yes, the overwhelming majority voted to condemn Russia, but which countries abstained? Well, who do we have here? We have India. Again, the nuclear power with 1.3 billion people living there. Iran, a major oil exporter. Iraq. Who else do we have? Oh, look. We have over here Pakistan, another nuclear power and neighbor, right? In the neighborhood, in the vicinity, near Russia. Who do we have here? South Africa. That's one of the BRICS, right? Who are the BRICS? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And of course, how did South Africa vote? Also, South Africa abstained. Didn't want to condemn Russia. How did China vote? Abstained. Do you see what's going on here? So Pakistan, China, India alone, that's about 40%, 40, roughly 40% of the world's population. That's just a few countries. And these countries are nuclear powers. They're close to Russia, not just figuratively, but literally. They are economic powerhouses, and they're on the rise. And they are not towing the U.S. line. They refuse to get in line like good doggies, like the U.S. and the West expected them to. So when you hear the international community condemns Russia, no. The international community is North America, Australia, and Western Europe. The rest of the world, a good chunk of the world, does not condemn Russia. They want to continue their ties with Russia. They're not stupid because they know where their bread is buttered. And India buying oil at this point in time, after people have been threatening it with sanctions, to say, if you buy oil from Russia, we will sanction you. That's how sanctions work. That's how you isolate people. People get scared to interact with the sanctioned person or target, and then that country sinks. It becomes isolated. And India was like, you know what? Screw you. We're just going to buy the oil. We don't care. And again, 3 million barrels? That's not the point. That's irrelevant. Especially when you look at how much oil India imports per day, right? So about 4 million barrels of crude oil a day. And if you look at who supplies that oil, Iraq supplies 23% of India's oil. Saudi Arabia supplies 18%. The UAE, 11%. And the US share of the Indian market will rise to 8%. So Russia is not even one of the major sources of oil for India. Again, it's not the point. The point is India is saying, screw your sanctions, we will do what we like. And India is doing this in rupees and rubles. The whole point of the US dollar being the world's dominant currency is that it's backed by oil, right? The whole understanding between the Saudis and the Americans was that Saudi Arabia exclusively only sells oil in US dollars, which gives the US dollar its value after Nixon removed it from the gold standard, right? So you have Bretton Woods putting the dollar on the gold standard, Nixon removes it, and then you have the creation of the petrodollar, the de facto creation of the petrodollar. And when you have countries that are trading oil not in US dollars, in something other than US dollars, that undermines the value of the United States dollar. And that is very significant, especially at this time. It shows you that a good chunk of the planet are looking to the east, not the west. And they're never going to tell you this, of course, because this is very bad news. Now, obviously, this sale by itself would be nothing significant, but you have to look at the context. What has happened in the last couple of weeks? What have I told you over and over? I feel like I'm the only person who's saying this stuff. It's incredible what's happening, and they never say it in the media. You have all of a sudden the Biden administration begging to get back in the Iran deal after they've been dragging their feet for a year. And the UK paid off its £400 million debt to Iran. Why do you think this is happening right now? Because the United States banned Russian oil imports, causing the price to rise. We had oil, 1 barrel the other day, priced at $135. That's the highest it's ever been since 2008. And so the price of oil has gone up. Even though the US only imports 3% of its oil from Russia, that's still millions of barrels, and that still causes the price to go up. And so now, all of a sudden, the US and the UK, they want the Iran deal. Why? Because sanctions would be lifted on Iran, and then Iran's oil would be back on the global market, causing the price to go down. Right? Maduro, the president of Venezuela, which the West has been telling us for years is not the president. They've been trying to prop up this stooge, Juan Guaido. All of a sudden, the United States is sending a delegation to speak to whom? Juan Guaido? No, sir. To Mr. Maduro, el presidente. Because he's the man in charge and he has the oil. Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves on the planet. It can't sell them. Why? Because of sanctions. So 2 countries, the United States has sanctioned into oblivion, Iran and Venezuela. All of a sudden they want their oil. Why? Because they want that price to go down. Then, of course, you have Pakistan. The day of this offensive, Imran Khan, the prime minister, goes to Russia. He meets with Putin and he buys 2 million tons of wheat and gas, Russian gas. Which shows, again, you know what? Pakistan is not on board with you guys. You want to condemn Russia? Go ahead. We're going to do our own thing. We are looking to the east. We don't care about you. Imran Khan even gave a speech. He said the EU asked him, why isn't he condemning Russia? He said, we're not your slaves. He said that. We are not your slaves. Who do you think we are? Your slaves? We will do what we like. Again, Pakistan is a nuclear power. Not a joke. India is now buying oil from Russia after all these threats about sanctions. He said, screw you, we're going to buy the oil. Even if it's just a tiny amount, we're going to buy it anyway. And we're not going to buy it in US dollars. We're going to buy it in rupees and rubles. And then Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman won't pick up the phone when Biden calls. The Emiratis won't pick up the phone because the Americans want their doggies in the Middle East to produce more oil, to make the price go down, right? You increase the supply, price goes down. Ain't happening. They won't help Biden. And the reason is actually quite insidious. It's really nefarious. They're basically angry that Biden won't help them to kill more people in Yemen, which is a whole other issue. Again, I've reported extensively on Yemen. I have an investigative piece coming on the siege. But the point is that the faithful lapdogs in the Middle East to the Americans, they're not playing ball. They won't increase oil production. And China, which gets a lot of its oil, a good chunk of its oil from Saudi Arabia, about 26%. Saudi Arabia is thinking of selling that oil to China, not in US dollars, in Chinese yuan. Man, I'm telling you, if I'm in the US government, I would be shitting myself right now. I feel like, oh my God, our dogs won't pick up the phone. Those guys, we sanction them into oblivion. They don't even want to talk to us. Then we can't get their oil from Iran or Venezuela. Remember, in the Iran deal, Russia all of a sudden threw in the ring this demand that it wants a written guarantee from the Americans that Iran will not be sanctioned for having ties with Russia. Because the whole point of the Iran deal is that Iran caps its nuclear program, and in exchange, the US lifts sanctions and helps Iran to normalize economic ties with other countries. Very important point. And the fact that if Iran gets the sanctions lifted and deals with Russia, it will be sanctioned again, just with new sanctions. And the Russians are saying, no, We don't want that. You give us a written guarantee you won't punish Iran just for having close ties with us. And so that has stalled the signing of the nuclear deal. I'm telling you, I'm one of the only people reporting on this thing, especially in independent media. And that thing was days from being signed. I have a whole playlist about the Iran deal on this channel. It was days from being signed, and now it's stalled. We don't know till when. It's indefinitely on hold. Everyone's gone back to their countries. All the parties that were negotiating. Iranian oil is still not back on the market. I'm telling you, man. If I was in the U.S. government, I'd be very worried right now. This is very, very bad. Not just for oil prices. Not about oil prices. Oil prices have gone up and down. This is bad for U.S. hegemony. This is bad for their energy security. Okay, number one. This undermines the U.S. dollar, and it puts a big dent in U.S. hegemony. And it kind of shows you exactly what we were talking about, what I was talking about when I said the West is shooting itself in the foot. You know, when Germany, for example, says it's going to cancel Nord Stream 2, even though 40% of its gas comes from Russia already, Russia's still getting paid. You know, Russia's still getting paid billions by the Europeans, by Germany and other NATO countries and EU members. They've not banned Russian energy imports. They're still paying Russia, and at a higher price now because the prices have gone up. So Russia's still getting paid with that. But, you know, you don't want Nord Stream 2, that's your problem. The Russians can just turn to Mongolia and China and kick off Power of Siberia 2, which would also be about 50 billion cubic meters, you know, in terms of output, which is very similar to Nord Stream 2. So they have other options. Europe doesn't have other options. You can't import liquefied natural gas to replace what you would get from Russia. You're mad. You would pay through the nose. The prices would be exorbitant. It's impossible. You don't even have the infrastructure to do it. Germany doesn't even have the infrastructure, the terminals. It has to run to build 2 terminals now, which wouldn't be anywhere near enough to get LNG from the US or replace that Russian gas with Qatar. You're dreaming. You're absolutely dreaming. And so they've really shot themselves in the foot because yes, Russia is being punished in the short term, but in the long term, they've forced, they've kind of, you know, they've shoved and pushed Russia into China's arms and vice versa. And they're bringing India and Pakistan and all these Asian countries closer together. They're bringing these BRICS closer to each other. They really screwed up. They miscalculated with this. You often hear, Putin is miscalculated. Forget Putin, man. Look at this on a bigger scale. This is the real story. It's not happening in Ukraine. The real story is the global realignment that you're seeing right now. Oil being negotiated and settled in other things that, you know, than in other currencies than the US dollar. Countries just shrugging off US sanctions and continuing to deal with Russia, refusing to condemn it at the United Nations. This is big. This is significant. You are seeing a global realignment in real time. And it's incredible to me that people are missing this. It's really, you know, they think that this is a joke. I'm telling you, Russia's getting punished. But what they've done in the long term is they're forcing Russia and China to come up with an alternative to SWIFT, alternative pipelines. They're creating closer economic ties between those countries, India and Pakistan, India, Russia, Pakistan, Russia, China, Russia. Man, I'm telling you, they have basically given a huge boost to the Belt and Road Initiative, the new Silk Road that China's endeavoring and of course with the Greater Eurasia Project. This is a huge dent in U.S. hegemony, and you will see that as time goes on. And really, they've basically just sped up. They've given a turbo boost to what was eventually going to happen. Oh boy, very interesting times. And if you look at this article from Reuters, they even say in the headline that India's oil imports from the U.S. are to rise amid criticism for Russian purchases. Sure. As I said, I think the U.S. is number 4 in terms of Indian imports, oil imports, but that doesn't change that they've defied those sanctions and that we're seeing the rise of a multipolar world. I think it's very important to underscore.